I will never subscribe to the idea that the customer is always right. Never. I will never subscribe to that because it's absolutely false.
What are some of the challenges that you faced becoming a CEO that you were not anticipating?
When that individual looked at me and said, "You can't do it," that was the defining moment. Oh, no. I'm going after this. I'm going to make this happen.
When have you seen emotion versus logic serve you best when it comes to dealing with your homeowners?
Heather was safe in that harbor, but that's not what I was built for. I'm going to embrace every challenge that comes my way. I'm going to suck everything that I can out of that and make sure that I reach the potential of my ship. That's the challenge, right? We're all trying to reach the potential of the ship we were built to be.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality. Today, I'm very excited to be here with Heather Brown, the co-founder and CEO at StayLuxe Properties. Thank you so much, Heather, for being with us today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. It's been fun. The journey to getting to this moment has been fun.
Yes, absolutely. So Heather, before we get started, can you just tell us where are you based? Where are you taking the call from?
Yeah, so I'm in Park City, Utah in the United States.
Amazing. Now, we of course want to get into the journey of how you got to where you are today. A couple of questions that we like to start with. First of all, what does hospitality mean to you?
You know, for hospitality, what hospitality means for me, it boils down to one word, and that's connection. Like everything about hospitality boils down to that one word, connection. You're connecting people to places, people to a space, people to people, people to experiences. It's connection. That's what hospitality means for me.
Love it. And what would you say is your edge? You know, the podcast, it's called the Hospitality Edge. So what would you say is your edge in the way that you decide to deliver hospitality at StayLuxe Properties?
I think our edge is that we are intentionally small. StayLuxe Properties will never be any bigger than about 40 properties. We truly believe that 40 of the right properties to offer to our guests is a good round number to work with. And because we're intentionally small, it allows us to continue to perform at a high level and provide services that are exceptional in comparison to some of our competition. Now, let's be honest, I'm not stupid enough to think that I'm the only one in this space doing that, because I'm not. There are plenty of other amazing operators in Park City and beyond that are doing similar type services and level of service. But for us, we feel that staying small is what allows us to provide an exceptional service to both our owners and our guests. We have two clients.
Right. How long have you been in business for with StayLuxe Properties?
So StayLuxe Properties is, I like to say 4 years young. It's a little over 4 years. But my business partner and I have been in the vacation rental industry in Park City for getting close to 10 years now.
Okay, perfect. So let's get straight into that story. So take us back to the very origins of you as a young professional. Were you always having a vision of wanting to be an entrepreneur, or how did the entrepreneurship component of your career came about?
Well, that's a really interesting question, simply because I think that I've always felt a draw to entrepreneurship. I guess, for lack of a better term, I don't play well with others. I don't know if that makes sense. It has more to do with the fact that I'm an introvert, I think, more than anything else. And I'm as I get older, I'm leaning more and more into that idea of being an introvert. And so, believe it or not, being an entrepreneur is a really good avenue for an introvert, because you get to make all the decisions. You don't necessarily have to put yourself out there. I mean, for certain industries, you do have to put yourself out there, but it just happened that in this case, I used to say that I accidentally came into this industry, but in reality, as I start reviewing the events, it more so was I was kind of forced into the industry. So, yeah, way back when, and when back in, like I said, we said close to a decade, but I guess it's maybe a little bit less than that. In 2018 is when I kind of came into this, and I came in with another vacation rental management company, but this was on the tail end of surviving a massive flood in Louisiana and making a move from Louisiana after mucking everything out and trying to pick up the pieces of what was there, then making cross-country move to Park City, Utah. And I fell into a position where a job was created for me at a vacation rental management company. And that's, like I said, it was almost out of necessity, right? Like I needed a job. And so this is not something I necessarily did in the past. I've been in kind of real estate construction, design, staging for many, many years in different capacities, but never vacation rental. In fact, I never even would have dreamed. I honestly never would have dreamed that I would have been a vacation rental. That's just not something that as a child I would have been like, someday I want to be a vacation rental manager. That was never anywhere in my thought process. So it really was more so, rather than accidental, it was more so kind of just a forced decision that has turned out to be a really good decision.
Yeah. So basically you got introduced to the industry through originally what was like a W-2 type position, like you were working for the company, correct? Now, we were talking a lot about the differences between, thinking logically, thinking emotionally, and we were talking about how on the emotional side, sometimes there's the need for, not necessarily the need for, but sometimes, enemies or figures out there that challenge us throughout our journeys and our careers end up becoming fuel for certain decisions that are made along the way. Can you tell us about, what happened while you were working that decided that allowed you to decide or encourage you to decide to, take a leap of faith and eventually become an entrepreneur on your own?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story because, as you alluded to, when you and I first talked, you shared an interesting book. And so I'll just throw that out there. Choose Your Enemies Wisely. Okay. And so you were talking to me about that because I was talking to you about how my personality type is equally logical and equally emotional. So anybody who's ever done Myers-Briggs, I'm an INFJ, which is the rarest personality type on the planet. I'm an advocate. And that personality type puts me in a position of, when I approach things, I'm thinking equally logical and equally emotionally. And you were fascinated by that because you're like, I've been reading this great book, Choose Your Enemies Wisely, and it talks about this, right? And so then we got to talking about, well, how has that played out in, my journey? And the more that I've thought about this, Sebastian, since you and I first talked, the more I determined a very specific idea here. And it was that the enemy in my situation, I could very easily put a name to the enemy, right? But in reality, if I pull the layers back, it was an idea that was my enemy, not the person. It was that this person looked me in the eyes and said, you can't do it. That idea was my enemy. The idea that I could not do something was my enemy. And in that moment, that's when the fire ignited in me emotionally and logically of like, wait a minute. Now that provides me with the will to go forward. But in conjunction with that, based on the book that you were talking about, Choose Your Enemies Wisely, in that pyramid diagram, opposite of will is skill. And here I had been in this situation where my skill set had been growing over the course of working in this other vacation rental management company. So not only did I have the will now, when that idea was presented to me, you can't do it, but I also had this skill to be able to move further up and move further on.
Interesting. Yeah, because one of the things that the book talks about is how we're somewhat thought that you either are logical or emotional, but that actually, what the book claims is that the most successful people actually find a way to combine both, right? Because you have both the plan as well as the motivation to execute the plan. And that motivation goes beyond just something logical. It's actually something that you can feel. So in your case, just, take us to the timeline of how that emotion built up. Was it something that, was it from one day to another you were like, okay, I'm done, I'm ready, like I'm taking the decision? Or would you say it's something more progressive that happened, throughout the weeks, throughout the months?
It's interesting because I think it was a split second moment. I mean, I guess the idea had been planted somewhere along the way of maybe this is a possibility to break off and start my own company. But to be fair, as many people feel when they're moving into a place of the unknown, there was a fear aspect that kind of kept me like, this is okay. I've got a W-2 pay. I'm paying my bills. It's all good. And then when COVID came, there were just certain things that got put into place that I think led up to that one moment. And like I said, when that individual looked at me and said, well, you can't do it, I think that was the defining moment. That's when that idea was that enemy of saying, oh, no. Time for me to put on my shield, my armor. I'm going after this. Like, I'm going to make this happen. So yeah, I think it leans more towards a single moment than it does a progressive. I mean, I think there obviously is a progressive aspect to this decision, but the vast majority of it, I think, was a split second moment of, wow, I have to make a decision right now.
Mm-hmm. And what were you feeling at that point? Like, what were you feeling when you knew that you were going to have to take that leap of faith and jump into the cliff, so to speak? What was the feeling there?
That's interesting because I think it's a mixture of feelings when you come to that moment. There's a mixture. It's a combination of fear, of grit, of anger, of just so many different emotions that are rolled into this ball of fire, essentially. And it's that fire that you hear people talk about that. I had this fire lit under me. That is what it is. It's all those emotions that come into this ball of fire that is just propelling you forward. And that's really what it felt like for me, is just that burning of, I can't sit on this. I can't sit still. I have to do something with this.
Do you think you would have acted on it if the feelings were not as strong as they were?
No, I absolutely would not have acted on it. Just by my personality type, again, as an introvert, it is very easy for me to hide. It's very easy for me to hide in the shadows. And it's interesting because people will approach me, especially after an event like this, even like the podcast, right? Where people will say, oh, you've been on podcasts before, and you've done webinars, and you've spoken on stages at conferences, and you've, helped to co-author a book in this space. And clearly you're not an introvert. No. Let me explain this to those people who don't understand what happens to an introvert. An introvert can be trained to do these things, to move when a fire is lit. We can learn the skill of doing this. But let me tell you something. When this podcast is over, I'm likely going to go take a nap. It will have drained everything out of me because that's how an introvert operates. We can engage, but our social battery is not the same as many other people. So yeah, like you said, this just, it took everything. If I had not had that fire, I would have very likely just sat back and said, this is good enough for me. This is good enough.
Interesting. Yeah. Whereas extroverted people, they get energized by talking to other people and whatnot. What fills your battery up?
For me, it's funny because, again, I'm just this very bizarre personality type. It's hard for me to describe to people because I'm either too logical or I'm too emotional, depending on who I'm talking to. And so for me, filling my battery comes in doing something creative, something quiet. Well, not even always quiet, because like right now I have started a second business where I am doing, design staging, and I'm actually flipping furniture, like restoring and flipping furniture pieces that I find on the side of the street or at a thrift store, something like that. But it's that act of creating. So even in this industry, I have those opportunities when I onboard a new home and I need to do, a full restaging or restyling of that home. That fills my battery. But to be fair, I'm not doing it with other people. I'm going into that space alone, and I'm letting my, what they call like the mind palace gets engaged. And I start looking at this space and I see things in my mind moving around, and colors and art and furniture and all of those things. They're just moving through my mind. And that's the space where I'm safe, where I'm who I was created to be. So yeah, that's what fills my battery, is that the opportunity to be a creator.
Interesting. Now let's go back to that timeline of when you decided to start your own business. Was there something that you were telling yourself you wanted to do differently from how this other management company was handling things, or uniquely? Or
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think that in the beginning, I copied and pasted. If I'm being really honest, in the beginning, it was a copy and paste, because I really didn't know any different, right? I was, and to be fair, I actually, when people ask me about coming into this industry and they say, what is the best piece of advice? Honestly, my answer is always work for somebody else first. Work for somebody else in this industry first before you decide to do this on your own, because you and I both know this is hard work. This is not easy work. And there are a lot of moving parts on a daily basis in this industry. And so I think that was very helpful that I started under someone else, but it also made it very easy for me to just do a simple copy and paste. Now, to be fair, I only had 30 days to build my business.
Why?
I had 30 days to build my business for 15 owners that were waiting 30 days for me to launch this business. And we started with 15 owners on day one. So that also, I guess, doubled down on the concept of copy and paste, because that just made it easier to copy and paste. But as time has passed, I would say that there are things that I've looked back on and said, you know what, I don't like the way that we did that then. Let's change that up. So, I mean, I guess maybe a simple example is the way that our owner agreement is structured. We don't have a recurring contract, like a renewing contract with our owners. It's an open-ended agreement. And I feel more comfortable with an open-ended agreement than with forcing my owners into a renewing contract. Listen, at the end of the day, if you don't want to work with me and I don't want to work with you, why would I force you into a long contract? Then we're both going to be miserable for however long that contract is. That makes no sense to me at all. I don't want to make my life even harder. And so that's a good example of some things that along the way I looked at, reviewed, audited, and thought, no, that doesn't align with what I want StayLuxe to represent.
What about the idea of intentionally being small in order to provide a better service? Was that something that you came up with, or was that something that they also had?
Oh, no. The company that I worked with was all about scaling. About scaling. It was the more the better. And in all fairness, it was to the point where we were taking on lower end properties that I would not bring into the StayLuxe portfolio. And it was simply because it was numbers based. Let's get more properties. And for me, when you're operating that way, it dilutes the product. So here I am starting a company and I've named it StayLuxe Properties. Why do I want to bring a property into that portfolio that is not up to our standards just to have a number? That makes no sense to me at all. And so I actually fairly quickly, by year 2, I was already shaving owners off that had come in with us initially because they did not speak to the standard of what I want StayLuxe. And that's, as I look at it now, that's a big driving force for me right now, is how do I bring on properties that are that do answer the StayLuxe standard, because that lifts everyone's property. If every property that's underneath the StayLuxe umbrella is up to a certain standard, then everyone's property gets a boost. So that's very important to me when I'm thinking about that. And it kind of, I guess on some levels that parlays even into another conversation that you and I had about my why, right? We started talking about my why and why I'm in this industry. And I shared with you that I struggled with this for several years, literally up until about 6 to 9 months ago, it was a huge struggle within me to understand why I didn't feel the same as everyone else in this industry. And by everyone else, I use that term very loosely because obviously it's not everyone else. I haven't interviewed every person that's in this industry. But I was starting to find that over and over again, I was hearing from the industry at a large that guest experience, everything is about guest experience. Every decision that we make is about improving guest experience. And I just kept feeling this ick. Like I couldn't buy in. I couldn't feel like I was fit into that space, into that conversation. And it just started making me question, what am I doing? Why did I start this business? Why am I continuing in this business if I don't fit into that space with everyone else? And again, it goes back to my personality type being different than pretty much everybody that I meet. I really started doing a hard audit on myself, my feelings, my view of the industry. And there was an experience that happened between 6 and 9 months ago that another light bulb moment. And it happens for me that way a lot, where I have these light bulb moments that in a moment I make a decision or I see something that I didn't see before. And in this case, it was the same thing. And I had this moment in which all of a sudden it became very clear that my why is not the guests. My why is my owner partners. That without my owner partners, I don't own any of the properties that are in my portfolio. And so without my owner partners, I don't have a business. And without my owner partners, I don't have a place to even host a guest. Mm-hmm. So they are my focus. They are my why. The people that I am when I'm onboarding, and those conversations and relationships that I build with these individuals who, have a second home in Park City. And even today, I even interviewed somebody or was being interviewed by somebody, kind of a two-way interview of a venture capitalist group that's looking to buy maybe 2 or 3 homes in Park City. And it was nice to be able to connect with that person and let them know that they are important to me. Their hopes, dreams, desires, goals are important to me. That's what I get up and get to my computer to do every day.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so there's this book that has become very famous in our industry, Unreasonable Hospitality, and it's always taken on with the mindset of, how does it apply to the guest, right? Mm-hmm. What about if we took that mindset and applied it towards the way you treat your owners? What does unreasonable hospitality towards your owners look like?
I love that you asked that, because that's what I was referencing before, but I just didn't want to throw it out there because, for me, it's like if I hear about unreasonable hospitality one more time, it's like I will poke my own eye out. But just because it's become so trendy, and I'm not really a trendy type of person, just generally. I often buck against trends when I see them just because I just don't, it gives me an ick factor. So having said that, when you're talking about unreasonable hospitality toward owners or in that relationship with owners, for me, again, it goes back to the word connection. If I can connect with an owner on a visceral level, I can have that 3-hour conversation at the beginning of our partnership, and I'm understanding, where did they go to school? Where did they grow up? How did they come to a place where they decided to buy a second home in Park City? Why do they have this second home in Park City? Do they like to visit it often? Or is it just something where they bought because they feel like it has value? Just having that connection with an owner versus, here's our owner agreement. Please please e-sign it by such and such date. I will give you the rest of the documents, and then we will work on onboarding you. That is not how we operate. We are friends with our owner partners. When they come into town, we're having dinner with them. We're visiting them, asking them how their children are, how is their dog still, kicking, kind of thing. It's connection. It really just comes down to truly connecting. It's part of why I keep my tech stack small in my business, because technology should be a tool. It should not replace human beings. Human beings require connecting. And it's weird coming from an introvert, right? That I'm talking about connection with other people. Because here's the thing, another thing that people don't often know about introverts. I really love people in doses. Of course, as an introvert, I like to be by myself also, but I would not be able to make it through life any more than anyone else without human connection. We all need that. And so I think that that speaks to your question of how does unreasonable hospitality affect my relationship with my owners? It completely affects it, because for me, that is the foundation. If I have not built a connection with my owners, then I have nothing to offer guests.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it boils down to for me.
Interesting. Now, when you and I were talking about this, you mentioned that one of the reasons why you came to that realization of your why being your owners was because of your logical side, right? Whereas maybe on the guest side, it's all emotion and whatnot. On
Yes.
the owner side is somewhat more logical, right? But at the
Yes.
same time, connection is also emotional, right? So there's a mix of
Yes.
two, even for the owners. When have you seen emotion versus logic serve you best when it comes to dealing with your homeowners?
That is a great question. And I can give you a perfect example just this last week. Here's where it coincides. Your emotions will tell you things that your logical mind will not tell you. So, setting the stage, about a year ago, I was asked to help design a home. These owners, it's a 3-bedroom home that's right near Main Street, which is the hub of Park City. It's perfect location. And I was asked to help with the designing of this home. They were essentially, kind of taking it down to the studs, not entirely to the studs, but they were wanting, all kinds of new fixtures, finishes, all of these different things. And so I went in and I worked on this home, believing at the time that my work on the design was going to translate into managing this home. Because again, perfect location, has a hot tub, has parking right next to Main Street. Like, it has all the things you'd want as a vacation rental on the surface. But a week ago, of course, the project has been finished. It's beautiful. The home, like the design work, it's very unique. My design style that I was asked to work with was kind of like this 1920s speakeasy, gentleman's cigar room kind of feel. Has very moody colors, beautiful brass sconces, very unique, not like anything that I've seen in Park City to date. And I had a lot of fun with the design process of this. And so when I went to go walk it with the owners last week, I'm looking around and I'm thinking this really came together, but I was not allowed to go and do the styling of the home. And so there were aspects of the styling of the home that I was looking at and saying, this is not going to work for a traveler. The size of the beds, where the beds were located in the rooms, some of the decor, artwork and decor, just there were things that became very clear as I was walking the home and having the conversation with the homeowner, that my gut, my emotions, right? They started to creep in and I was like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel good. And so I made that hard decision. I sent, after spending like 3 hours with them that day, walking through, talking with them, getting to know them even better. And 2 days later, I sent out an email and said, I'm so sorry that this is not going to be a good fit. And, a lot of other people would say, you're crazy. This place is a 3-bedroom with parking, with a hot tub right off Main Street. Like, this is the perfect place. But it's there. It's in your gut. You know when something is right and when something is wrong. And if you are willing to overlook the logic and go with your gut, every time I've done it, I've been right. Every time that I follow my gut, every time that I let my emotion come in and help color the decision, I've been right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was reading a book called Anti-Fragile, and it talks about this concept of basically not just being resilient or strong, but actually becoming better thanks to chaos and thanks to uncertainty and stress and whatnot. So it's a very, very interesting book. It goes into all sorts of tangents on statistics and all sorts of things. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because one thing it mentioned is when you need more than one reason to do something or not to do something, then that tells you that you shouldn't do it. Like if you need like all these different reasons for why you should work with this property,
Yep.
then you're just trying to convince yourself logically on why you should do it, but
Yep.
you shouldn't do it.
Right.
Type of thing.
And I think that's an interesting point, because really what happened was I was noticing that in order to keep this property on, and in this conversation, it was one exception after another exception after another exception to how we operate on a daily basis in order to keep this property as a vacation rental in our portfolio. And I thought to myself, this makes no sense. Why would we make exception after exception after exception to our regular business model just to keep this one home? Why? Like, that makes no sense when there are plenty of other homeowners who are more than willing to come under the umbrella of what StayLuxe Properties is and operate under our regular business model. I shouldn't, to your point, I should not have to make multiple exceptions. It's one thing to make one exception for an owner and say, oh, you live locally, so you want to use your house, on the weekends if it hasn't booked within 7 days of the check-in date, fine. That's fine. If you're within a 7-day booking window, that's fine. You're at the lowest possible rates anyway, so go ahead and come stay in your home, and it won't count against your the number of days you can stay in your home. But to make multiple exceptions in order to bring a property on, to your point, you're just creating 1, 2, 3, 5 reasons along the way of like, well, if I just change this, then I can bring this property on. If I just change that, I can. No, I don't need to be changing anything. Either they want to work with us under the way that we operate that is proven. It's proven at this point. Either they want to operate that way and listen to my expertise in this area, or they don't. And I'm not going to sit here and argue it back and forth or encourage, coerce, whatever other words you want to use in order to keep an owner on board. And yes, there was a heartache there. In all fairness, there was a heartache there because I was so looking forward to showcasing this work that I had done on the design side. And now I can't because it's not a good fit. But that's okay. I will have other opportunities for designing other homes and being able to showcase that work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's another framework that also relates to this conversation that we're having on following your intuition, that I read in Tim Ferriss' book. It was basically, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no.
If it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no.
Exactly. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no. It's a hell no. Absolutely,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes,
And
yes,
it was so
absolutely.
helpful. I talked about when I was in charge of recruitment at Angel Host, a company that was growing very fast, and we were hiring a lot of people. And someone that likes people, you tend to see the good side in everyone, right? And so it was really hard to say no to someone that you saw potential in. And so then, I started making this very complicated grids and grading people based on scores and all sorts of weird things. And it was taking me forever to decide on whether a candidate should move on to the next stage or not. And then I just simplified it. And I was like, is it a hell yes? As simple as that. And if it wasn't a hell yes, then candidate was out.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there are times in our lives too, though, Sebastian, where we do come up to a position where we don't have either a hell yes or a hell no. And what do we do in those positions, right? When we're put in that position. And I read an article a while back that talked about a U.S. military leader. And when he was called up into service and was asked to make some really difficult decisions. And he came into a space, it's something that really struck me. when I read this story because he was interviewed about this situation where a major military decision needed to be made. And people had just been kind of sitting on their hands for, if I'm not mistaken, it was like 5 years. This decision had needed to be made. Nobody was willing to make this decision. He comes into the room and he's just like, hey, give me all the information. They give him the information. He says, okay, this is what we're going to do. And so they walk out of the hall and one of his subordinates approaches him and says, if you don't mind me speaking, frankly with you, I would like to ask you a question. He said, no, yeah, absolutely. Ask me what you want. He says, I know for a fact you don't have a clue what those people were just talking about. And he's like, you're right, I didn't. And he said, well, how did you make that decision? He said, because that's what I was asked to do. I was brought in to make the decision that many, many, many highly intelligent, highly capable people could not make in the last 5 years. They've been sitting on this. They hired me to come in and make a decision, and that's what I did. And he said, and here's the thing. I made the decision, and guess what? If it was the wrong one, then I'm confident that all of those highly intelligent, highly capable people will be able to pivot. But somebody has now made the decision. And we are sometimes faced with those moments, are we not? Somebody has to make the decision, whether it's a hell yes or a hell no. We don't even know going into that circumstance, but somebody has to be the person that makes the decision. And for me, I am that person in many circumstances in my business. I am the CEO. I have to make that decision. If it's something we've been sitting on for a year, for 2 years, whatever it is, it's for me to go to my team and say, this is what we're going to do. And guess what? Some of my decisions have been wrong. And that's okay, because I'm relying and confident in the team that I have in place to come to me and say, this isn't working the way we thought it was going to work. We're going to have to make a pivot. Great. But at least we moved. At least we moved. We didn't just sit and sit and sit. So that to me is the technique that sometimes we forget about, because every now and then you are going to hit that decision where it's not a hell yes or a hell no. It's I don't know. Either way could work. And somebody has to step in and be that person that makes that decision. That's that military general, right? That's called in at the end and we're hiring you to make this decision. Okay, make it. Just make the move.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting, and also on that point, one of the things I've learned, from seeing Angel host from the very beginning, employee number 3, we had, almost nothing at that point in terms of properties and whatnot, and yes, we've grown a lot since then. But the interesting thing is that the founders, this was the 7th company that the founders had started and scaled and whatnot. So in my head, it was like, oh, they will have everything figured out because they've done this so many times. They have so much experience. They have so much seniority. Yet when you see the day-to-day of any business, it's all trial and error. Like it's all just one decision at a time, and pivot and adjust. And, oh, we didn't think about this. Oh, we missed that. Oh, we should have done this. And so it's like, to your point, as long as you're moving forward, then you can adjust along the way. Now, how have you, Heather, been able to train, so to speak, that decision-making muscle?
So it's really interesting because as we started talking about this, it brought up something that you and I had talked about before, and is that I'm a consummate perfectionist. Okay, so when I started this business, having 30 days to build the company was a massive stressor for me, because my core personality type is such that I don't launch something, I don't go into something unless it's perfect, unless I can make it perfect. And so having said that, it was very difficult for me in those moments to understand the idea that perfectionism is not possible. And I learned very quickly an important concept. And that concept is that my owners and my guests are not expecting perfection. We often think that they are. That's a misconception that many of us have, is that owners and guests are expecting perfection. They're not really expecting perfection. They're expecting progress. So when I can switch the word perfection with progress, it helps me to, like you said, flex that muscle in the decision making muscle. And so in this, so let me see if I can frame this out for you. So instead of having everything perfect on day one, let's think about some of these large companies. Let's think about something like Amazon. Let's say that Amazon waited to launch Amazon until they had what they have today. Well, can you imagine all of what they would have missed out on if they had waited until today to launch their company? Give me just a second. The dog just arrived.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, right. I need you to keep the dog downstairs. I'm doing a podcast right now. I am so sorry. They are not normally home.
No worries. It's all good. It's all good.
Okay, so so speaking of Amazon, if they had waited until what you would consider to be kind of the perfect product that they have right now, and they had waited for that to launch their business, they would have missed out on, I mean, what are we talking? Billions of dollars? I mean, seriously, billions of dollars. Instead, we as consumers enjoy the process. We're all voyeurs when it comes down to it. We are all voyeurs. We enjoy the process of watching things improve. I mean, think about the YouTube videos that get the biggest number of hits and likes. It's people doing processes, and people are just watching the progress of this process or project. It's the same thing when you are running a business and learning how to make certain decisions, is that when you really boil everything down, our homeowners want to see that you're making an improvement, one little improvement here, or one little improvement there. If we sat stagnant as a business, all of us, your founders, the same thing. If they sat stagnant as business and they never made improvements, how would you feel as employee number 3? You'd kind of be like, this doesn't seem to be growing. This doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Like, what are we doing here? Do you see what I'm saying? So it's the same thing. It's something that I had to really learn and flex as I was that, like you said, that muscle had to flex as I was building the company and continue to build the company, is that my owners want to see little improvements here and there. Hey, or we're going to add concierge services this year. Hey, we've taken on a new or onboarded to a new property management software that's going to offer you better access to your KPIs. Hey, we've done, we're taking pictures twice a year now, or whatever it is, whatever small decision that you're making, it's progress. And it's the same thing for guests. I think it was Tyann Marsnick that said recently in an article where, it was either Tyann or Robin Cragen that said that every failure that we have as a team with guests, every time that we've made a mistake with a guest, is an opportunity for growth for our team. And it's an opportunity to go back and prove ourselves to that guest. So again, guests are not always expecting perfection. What they're expecting is progress, improvement. So if you've made a mistake with a guest, you have that opportunity to go back and improve it then. You can change the trajectory of that sentiment by just stepping in, making a different decision. Like you said, pivoting. It's all about the pivoting. You're going to have challenges. Life is all about challenges. It's supposed to be about challenges, because challenges and setbacks are what help us to grow as human beings. Without those, life would be very boring. Without a challenge or a setback, we would not be able to enjoy peaceful times. We wouldn't know any different. So it's that kind of opposition in all things. We all need that in order to grow and be the best version of ourselves, to be the best version of our companies. We have to be experiencing those things.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that progress rather than perfection. You can call it done is better than perfect too. I've heard that as well. Like, better done than perfect.
Yeah, my sister has a sign in her office that says, practice makes progress. Because back in the day when I was a kid, that phrase was practice makes perfect. But the reality of it is it doesn't. Practice makes progress.
Love it. Love it. Now, tell me something, Heather, in terms of, challenges. So talking about challenges, not everything is just perfect and beautiful. What are some of the challenges that you faced becoming a CEO that you were not anticipating?
That's an interesting question. I think that for me, the two biggest challenges are working with my ex-husband, which many people in the industry know that my business partner is my former spouse. That is a massive challenge, but it is also a massive opportunity for growth for me as a human being. It would have been very easy for me. We were still married when we started the company. And only about 4 months after we started the company was when we became divorced. And so since then, we've been divorced for almost 4 years now. And I find that for me, it provides me with massive growth on a personal level, which translates into growth as a CEO as well. The way that I interact with people, the understanding and learning of healthy boundaries has been key to continuing in this industry as well. Especially because, let's be honest, we have to create healthy boundaries with everyone around us. And I think for me, that's, again, as an INFJ, I tend to be a people pleaser. I tend to be a person who wants to say yes to everything. And moving through the divorce and working with my ex-spouse has taught me things about healthy boundaries that have translated very clearly into my relationship with my owners, and more specifically, my relationship with guests. As we referenced before, I pull myself back from guest interactions very often because I am not and will never, this is where I'm different from a lot of people in the industry as well. I will never subscribe to the idea that the customer is always right. Never. I will never subscribe to that because it's absolutely false. There are plenty of customers out there that are very wrong, that they are not right. And I'm not going to bend over backwards. I have created healthy boundaries for myself when it comes to guests, that you're not going to speak to my team a certain way and still think that you are going to get the type of hospitality that we offer our guests that treat us with respect. You're not going to. Now, I'm not going to be hateful, mean, spiteful, or any of those things, but I am going to be very clear with that type of guest and say, listen, if you want to have a meaningful conversation with me about this issue, then we can do that. But you are not going to curse and yell at me over the phone. That is not how this is going to go down. And so I think that that challenge has been very helpful for me working with an ex-spouse. Beyond that, I think balance, life balance has really been and I guess maybe I was somewhat aware of that, but I think that on the surface, don't we often do this? We look at Elon Musk or we look at, Bill Gates, and we think, they're living a life of ease. They own this company. They're the CEO. They got all this money. This is a pretty easy life for them. Yeah, it's not. The life of a CEO, co-founder, business owner is not that. And so it has been very challenging for me as, again, a perfectionist, somewhat of a workaholic kind of person, to find balance in my life. That's been a huge challenge for me. And I'm not there. I'm much further along with the healthy boundaries than I am with the balance. Let's put it that way.
And would you agree with the fact that balance looks very differently from one person to another? Balance is gonna mean something completely different.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest way that I look at it is through the eyes of a woman, obviously, because those are the eyes that I have, right? And so I often look back to, and even today, look at other women who are doing this same thing while raising a family. And I think to myself, what kind of superwoman are you? Because I can tell you right now that just having a dog in my household is enough for me. Do you know what I mean? I don't know how a lot of these women find the balance that they are finding. And maybe they're not. I don't know. Maybe they're not finding balance. Maybe they're like me. But at the same time, like you said, balance is going to look different for every person. For me, what I would like to see is more time spent doing creative things, more time spent on focusing on my health. being able to volunteer more, that sort of thing is what I would find as more of a balanced life. But like you said, everyone's balance is going to look different.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at your journey as a CEO from someone that was first put in that role and becoming an entrepreneur for the first time and whatnot to where you're at now, what are the main differences you see in how you decide to spend your time? How do you decide what it is that you should be focusing on now versus let's say a few years back when you were first starting?
I think the things that have changed for me when it comes specifically down to the balance aspect of being a CEO of what I thought it was when I first started versus what it is now is that I'm becoming more and more willing to delegate. I wear a lot of hats still, but I'm becoming more and more aware that delegation is important to the growth of my business and to my personal ability to find balance. And it's not easy. It's not easy for me to delegate because I come from the school of if you want it done right, do it yourself. That's the school that I came from as a Gen Xer. That's the school of thought that I came from. If you want it done right, do it yourself. And that's even my family of origin. That was the idea, was if you want it done right, do it yourself. And so stepping into the role of a CEO with that mindset, I would say is damaging because I can't do it all myself. I have to be able to, and as a twice divorcee, kind of thing, I also have issues with trust, as you can imagine. And so trusting that things are going to get done the way I want them to get done, if I hand this over to someone else, is a challenge for me. But again, I am seeing that is something that has shifted over time, over this course of the 4 years. Is I need to pass certain things off and make wise and strategic decisions on what does get passed off and who it gets passed to.
And how can someone that is listening to this and feeling the same way, feeling that if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself, having a hard time letting go, having a hard time delegating, what has allowed you to let go and start delegating more than before?
I think age, maturity, that may sound very trite, but I'm 50 and I don't want to spend the rest of my life, the last half of my life, worrying about things that I don't need to worry about. I want to be able to free up some of my time to do the things that bring me joy. And worry does not equal joy. It never has and it never will. So releasing some of the things that in the past I thought were very important, integral things to moving my business forward, I have let go in order to allow for space within myself, within my head. I want to open that space up for other things that bring me joy. I just have found that letting go of bits and pieces of my perfectionism and the need to control everything has brought me a sense of peace that I otherwise cannot get. And like I said, at my age, that's important to me. I mean, for the first 50 years of my life, I guess I probably could have lived a very different life if I had not been so wanting to be in control of everything and all of those different things. And, but at the same time, it is what it is. I can't change that. All I can do is learn from that. And I think that is the key, right? When you come up to certain decisions in your life is, what have I learned in the past? If I've made this decision in the past, has it brought me joy? Has it brought me peace? If the answer is yes, then great. Okay, then we can continue to move in that direction, continue on that path. But if the answer is no, then I might need to find a different cutoff here. I might need to find a different path that I can take and see if that brings me more peace and more joy. So I think age and maturity really has brought me to that space of saying, it's time for me to let go of some things so that I can release that space for something better.
Interesting. So just to push back on that one, do you think that you could not have let go earlier? It was just a matter of time and waiting for that maturity to come? Or do you think there's something that, let's say, if you were talking to yourself a couple of years back, you could have said something that maybe would have allowed that person to let go?
Well, I think I would have shared with my former self that concept, that idea. But of course, for all of us, we're all on an individual journey, an individual path that requires specific circumstances to teach us certain concepts and ideas. And I think, in all fairness, this whole thing, this whole StayLuxe Properties has been a crucible of learning for me. And we go back to the very beginning of our conversation of the choose your enemies wisely. This idea that I needed this crucible, this experience to exponentially grow. Like literally there are people in my life that knew me 5, 7, 10 years ago or longer. And they have said to me, you are a different person today than you were then. It was this experience has been, and I look at it because there are definitely days when you want to throw your hands up in the air and say, I'm done. Like, I just don't even want any of this anymore. This is a lot of work. I'm tired. I don't want to talk to another guest. I don't want to talk to another owner. I just want to curl up on my couch and watch a movie with, a bowl of popcorn. There are definitely days like that. We've all encountered them. But I truly look at this experience and I think there are things that I have learned on this journey that I am not certain I would have learned had I stayed, let's say, married to my first husband even. And just in that comfort zone of, I'm an exceptional homemaker. Let's put it that way. All my friends called me the Martha Stewart of the town that I was in. Like, I'm an exceptional homemaker. I love being at home. I love being a homemaker. And so I could have stayed in that comfort zone, that bubble. It goes back to that concept that you hear people talk about, that a ship is safe when it stays in the harbor, but that's not what a ship was built for. That's who I am. Heather was safe in that harbor, but that's not what I was built for. So see, here's the emotion that comes out of me. That's not what Heather was built for, was to stay safe in a harbor. And so instead, I'm going to embrace every challenge that comes my way. And I'm going to suck everything that I can out of that and make sure that I reach the potential of my ship. That's the challenge, right? We're all trying to reach the potential of the ship we were built to be.
Wow, that's powerful. Now, Heather, when you look ahead, do you think you still have an enemy that's fueling you to want to push harder, or is it now more of a carrot in front of you that you're trying to go after?
I would say that my enemy is failure. I'm not a fan of failure. Again, this speaks to my core personality type and the fact that I'm a perfectionist by nature. I'm not a fan of failure. And so I would say that really is that the concept. Again, we go back to the idea of a concept instead of a person. The concept of failure is my enemy, and that's what I fight against every day. That's the will that keeps me going. But I also balance it. So going back to that concept of balance, I also balance that will to move on in order to not fail with the idea that I don't know everything. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow any more than anyone else does. And so that's been part of my letting go as well as I've built this business, is this idea that I cannot control what's going to happen. StayLuxe Properties may spiral the drain a month from now, a year from now. I don't know. I don't know what's coming. And in real estate, let's be honest, none of us know what's coming. Real estate is very volatile. Historically speaking, it has been a space in which if you are really diligent, you can come out ahead, right? So that's the reason why we all get into real estate. Those of us who are in it, that's the reason we got there. But at the end of the day, we don't know. The market could crash tomorrow. We have no idea. And so letting go of those expectations. Here's the thing. One of the things that I've learned over the years is that expectations are the root of resentment. And so I have let go of any expectations of what could be for StayLuxe Properties. I have goals, but that's not the same thing as expectations. Expectations and goals are not equal. They are not equivalent. Expectations are, I expect that I'm going to have 40 properties and that I'm going to have X income and all these things. And I understand about the whole concept of manifestation. I think that you should use manifestations and you should work on manifesting things in your life. But expectations are often not met. And when an expectation is not met, it breeds that feeling of resentment of, well, I felt like this is what I deserved. This is what I should have gotten, and I didn't get it. And now I'm angry and I'm resentful. So I have practiced really hard at letting go of expectations. That's even within my team. That's with my personal relations, even with owners, the expectation that, every owner is going to come in and stay at their home and they're going to leave it clean because it belongs to them. No, that expectation is false. Not every owner is going to do that. So why set myself up for this feeling of being angry and resentful when I don't have to be? Why not just go into it freely and say, whatever happens is what's going to happen. I'm going to control what I have control over. I can control how I react to things. I can control how I speak to people. Kindness matters. If we get nothing else out of this podcast, kindness matters. So kindness matters. And so every day I have a set, I actually got this from Will Slickers, that's starting my day with this kind of a ritual where I speak certain affirmations. And part of that for me every day is, in a world where I can be anything, I will be kind. I go into every day that way. I go into every day with this idea of, let me zoom out and recognize that what happens today does not define the rest of my life. I'm going to do the best with whatever comes my way, but today's does not define the rest of my life. If I make a mistake, that's okay. Tomorrow's a new day. There are a lot of years left, hopefully. Again, no expectations, right? So for me, that's a big part of how I approach what I'm doing every day, is let go of those expectations. If StayLuxe Properties is meant to flourish and grow, then it will. And let's be honest, it has absolutely nothing to do with me. I am not StayLuxe Properties. I am the co-founder and CEO, and that's it. I am not the entity. It is not my identity, and I am not its identity. We are working in tandem. Heather Fillmore Brown is working in tandem with StayLuxe Properties. But if something happens and StayLuxe Properties, goes out of business next month, it doesn't define me. It's not my identity, or vice versa. Wow. And I think that is a big thing that happens with people when they start a business, is that it becomes their identity. And to be honest with you, it was my identity. So you're talking about the growth of who I am as a person. When I first started it, StayLuxe Properties was my identity. It was like, this is my life. This is all consuming. This is who I am. When I introduce myself, hey, I'm a business owner. Nobody cares. Nobody cares that I'm a business owner. They're like, so there are a lot of business owners out there. So why should that be my identity? It's not. It's something that I get up and I do every day, and I will always do my best. It goes back to something that you and I talked about in an early conversation too, when we were talking about, exchanging kind of books or whatever. And I was talking about the 4 agreements. Listen, the last agreement of the 4 agreements is always do your best. It's simple. It's very simple. Just always do your best. And if anybody who has not read the 4 agreements, I highly encourage you to, because if you can live your life by those 4 agreements, things will be fine. Everything will be fine.
I love that. And I can see how liberating it can be, by the way, to separate your identity from the business, because now all of a sudden you can breathe, knowing that whatever happens in the business, you are you. And as long as you do your best, then you're successful.
Yes. Yes, because success is not defined by an entity, is it? I think people sometimes do that. I was voted most likely to succeed when I graduated from high school. I was valedictorian of my high school class. And so, it seemed like it was the thing to do. Vote the valedictorian as the most likely to succeed. And as I was raising a family for the first 20 years of my life, I went to 1 semester of college. I'm a 4.0 in college for the 1 semester I went. But I went to 1 semester of college, and then I moved into a space where I became a wife and a mother. And that's what I did for almost 20 years. So when I'm going back to my 10-year reunion, my 20-year reunion, there was a part of my soul that just thought, ugh, how do I show up at this reunion? Like, where's the measure of my success? Well, what a small-minded way to think of it. I had been successful. Not everything is about whether you own a business or whether you have the next best, iPhone, or whether you have the fastest car on the road. I mean, all those things are nice and fun and whatever else, but they really don't define us as people. My relationships with other people, the way I feel about myself, the way I see myself in relation to other people, that's really what defines me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, just to wrap this up, because I could stay here for another 2 hours, this is so interesting, but I'm sure you have other things to do on a Friday afternoon. Another way to talk about this idea of letting go of expectations could be to say, don't focus on the outcomes, focus on the inputs, not outputs, but inputs, right? All of a sudden, you're like, as long as I did what I was supposed to do to the best of my ability, then that's it, right? You're successful. Whatever happens, it's not up to you at that point. Right. If you did your best, then it's not up to you. That's
exactly right. Do your best every day. That is all anyone is asking of anyone else on this planet, is do your best every day. And whatever happens is exactly what is supposed to happen at that point. Mm-hmm. Embrace it, accept it. Sometimes it's 100-year flood that you don't have any control over. Sometimes it's a divorce. Sometimes it's starting a new business. Sometimes it's starting a new family. We don't know what's coming tomorrow, but all we have control over is doing our best with what we have in front of us, and then offering everyone else grace that they're doing the best with what they have today. If we were all in that mindset, can you imagine the world we would live in? If we were all doing our best and then offering grace to others, saying, I know they're doing the best they can with what they have today, our world would be a completely different space.
And then the end result becomes not the outcome or the output, but who you become by doing your best.
Yes. We would all be the best version of ourselves. We would be sailing, our ships would be sailing exactly where they are supposed to be sailing in the ocean. Yeah, wow. Absolutely.
This was good, Heather. This was good. Thank you for sharing all of those experiences and for opening up your story and your emotions with us here. I really, really appreciate it, Heather. Where can people connect? Where can people follow along the journey?
Well, that's an interesting question, because as an introvert, there's not really any journey to follow. I often think to myself that I'm doing myself a huge disservice by not, sharing journeys like everybody else does on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and stuff. It's just not I'm not that person. I'm trying to be that way with my other business because I know it's, again, one of those things that people like to see, people refinishing furniture and from end beginning to end kind of thing, but it's not really my thing. So following my journey is not really a thing,
So
but you can
don't
find
follow.
me.
At
Yeah,
least
you
connect on
can
LinkedIn.
find me on LinkedIn. We do have a Facebook page as well. And I love connecting with people in my own way, so to speak. Like I said, I'm not normal. I guess if by the world's definition of normal, I'm not that. I'm not a trend follower. Um, I'm not any of those things, but I am one of those people who wants to connect in a more meaningful way with people that I have the opportunity to connect with. I want to know other people's stories. I want to know that makes them tick, what makes them upset, what makes them happy, those kinds of things. It's just part of my core personality type that I like that type of connection. Yeah. So LinkedIn,
Absolutely.
Facebook. You can always email
LinkedIn.
me, Heather at StayLuxe Properties. There you go.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Heather, for taking the time. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah. Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye bye.